welcome everyone to this morning's session. Glad to have you with us here. Lance, do you want to advance the next slide here? So as we bring everybody together here preparing for the session this morning, I did a little bit of research, and it was interesting in terms of some of the reports that are being surfaced now with 2019 data. There are some interesting statistics that are being shared around data breaches and fraud in 2019, and through January of July of 2019, this year alone, over 31 million records were exposed in the 13 largest data breaches. This is a fact that is not trending positive. It seems like we don't go by a day or a week without reading about another organization being breached. No industry is immune to this. Healthcare breaches, I read in terms of preparation for the session this morning that healthcare breaches are costing that sector over $4 billion this year, which is, interestingly enough, it's outpacing the security and technology spend that industry is trying to focus on. So breaches are hitting that industry, along with every other industry, very hard. Specific to PCI compliance and payment security, that really is the topic of what we're going to be talking about today. By 2020, it is estimated that card-not-present fraud is going to reach over $7.2 billion. And with a lot of this fraud taking place in the contact center, this really is hitting home for today's discussion. Next slide. So what we're going to talk about today is helping organizations understand what sort of challenges are out there. With Ribbon and Echo together, what we hope to do is to share some insight in terms of what you can do to head off some of this fraud and these compliance challenges, and really challenge you to think about why you need to rethink your PCI DSS strategy. So let's dive in here. Okay, next slide. So the thought that PCI compliance doesn't equal security, sometimes that's a puzzling statement for a lot of organizations. What we have found, and actually this is kind of an industry statistic, that where organizations experienced a breach, those organizations were in fact PCI compliant at the time of the breach. And all of the information that we are going to share here this morning is going to point back to there's truly a false sense of security out there when it comes to PCI compliance. Just because you're compliant at one point in time, it does not mean that that the organization is under constant basically barrage in terms of the fraudsters trying to take away sensitive data. So it's important to remember that just because you're compliant doesn't mean that fraud still can't happen. So next slide. So exactly what is happening with PCI compliance? What we're finding, and as most enterprises are finding, PCI DSS compliance, it's a moving target for them. Guidelines are constantly being updated, and what that means for the enterprise and the contact center is that they've got to quickly adapt to remain compliant and secure. Just this past November, the PCI Council released updated guidelines around handling VoIP payments. And what we're seeing is a lot of organizations are now dealing with those changes. Just this past September, the PCI Council has released an update which is around the PCI DSS 4.0 guidelines. And while it's going to take a bit of time for those guidelines to be implemented, what we're seeing is that organizations are likely going to have to answer and work with their auditors, whereas they might have been able to pass a PCI audit through some compensating controls. Those controls may not be applicable anymore with all these updated guidelines that are coming. And with this constant change in the guidelines and regulations, we have to consider what this really means to the enterprise. The enterprise has to protect their customers' data. It really translates to brand loyalty. Within the contact center, all these moving targets mean additional operational costs and training those contact center agents so that they're following processes that are not only compliant, but they're protecting the customers' end data. So next slide. So what are contact centers doing out there? What's really happening in terms of trying to protect customer data? What we're seeing as we talk to organizations, a lot of companies have tried to kind of take a Band-Aid approach to all this, if you will. A lot of times we see that organizations are relying upon pause and resume, which can be very problematic. It doesn't fully descope the contact center, the agents, the desktops, and their network environment could still be exposed to the sensitive data, even though the recording, it might be blocking the sensitive data. The rest of the environment could still be in scope. And once the data is there, it just introduces a lot of risk for the organization. Other organizations are relying on things like clean rooms or white rooms to try to descope this data, or they might be transferring a caller who is making a payment out to a third-party IVR, which it doesn't create the best customer experience. So it's kind of a Band-Aid approach, and not only is it complex for the organization to maintain, it likely is not creating a great customer experience. So we found that on average, in the U.S., organizations are using 3 different approaches to try to maintain PCI compliance in the contact center. And when you couple that all together with patching and trying to maintain those solutions, it's a very frustrating process. Okay, next slide. So in the contact center, we know that customers today, they really are demanding a very smooth and elegant experience when you service them. And what this means for a lot of organizations is that they've got to invest in technologies and processes that are not only going to better serve the end customer, they're also going to create an environment that is truly compliant and secure. And when we think about, all of these complex and convoluted processes that may come into play in terms of, trying to provide that protection, it is an expensive venture, and it truly is, it's holding back your contact center in terms of, supporting your customers in the best way. And organizations, quite frankly, they don't have the human capital or the budgetary resources to keep redoing things over and over again. Okay, so next slide. Another factor that comes into play here when we talk about PCI compliance and security is the cost of cyber insurance. You talk to any CFO out there, and more than likely they are going to tell you that cyber insurance premiums are not going down. They're doing nothing but rising. And the Ponemon Institute recently did this survey, and this cyber liability is one of the top business risks for them. And according to the 2019 study from the Institute, they found that the average cost of a cyber breach in the U.S. was $8.9 million. So it's a significant impact to the bottom line of the enterprise, something that can't be ignored. And then when we think about, how organizations today need to basically bring together their staff to service the customer, a lot of organizations are needing to move to a work from home model in a tight labor market. But when you think about the challenges of having those remote agents, it becomes more complex as organizations need to put the security, the processes, all of the training in place to be able to handle secure payment. So it presents a huge challenge for contact centers as they try to leverage these new models in terms of supporting customers. Okay, next slide. So what does this all mean? It really does impact the customer, and that's really where everything leads back to. The customer should be at the very heart of all these decisions that we make in terms of servicing them in the best way possible. Customers truly expect that enterprises and organizations are going to take the proper responsibilities to protect their financial data, protect their PII, if you will. They expect that you are going to take that responsibility, and in terms of any lag in that effort, it could mean to impact to your CSAT and your NPS scores. I don't think there's any network or security architect that wants to take the blame with their C-suite when these scores start to go down because of a poor customer experience that point back to poor service in the contact center. So those are just some of the things that we're seeing out there in terms of some of the challenges that organizations are seeing. And we'll have some time to talk about some of these challenges at the end here. But now I would like to turn it over to Jerry Ehrenberg with Echo and Daniel from Ribbon, and they're going to share some insight in terms of what organizations can do to help solve some of these challenges. Jerry?
Perfect. So what's really at risk in your environment today when you take a card payment over the phone in your call center? Really everything on your network. It affects your SBCs, your PBXs. If you have an in-house IVR, there's voice data there. All of your databases, because you have credit card information, your agent desktop. Even if you outsource, many of your customers are going to be concerned about their ability to protect your data. So as you can see here, pretty much everything in your environment is in scope from a PCI perspective, and you'll have to address that for your annual audits. Next screen. De-risking adds more work. I mean, you have to, at that point, involve your operations people. You have to secure your databases. You have to secure wherever you store your credit card data. You have to do something with your call recordings, either pause and resume or encrypt or something like that. I mean, it's got to be isolated and protected. And it's going to keep getting worse and worse. And every year, it costs companies millions of dollars to secure their environment as the rules keep changing. Next slide, please. So this diagram really depicts, what is in scope in your environment today when you take a payment over the phone. As you can see, like we mentioned earlier, your agent desktop, your chat sessions, call recordings, your IVR, switches, SBCs, PBXs, just basically your entire environment is in scope. And when you have a breach, even if you're compliant and you've taken the measures, if that data is there, there's a way to get to it if somebody wants to, if they try hard enough. Next slide. All right. So with CallGuard in place, what we do is we remove that information from your environment. It's patented, and we use DTMF masking to remove any card information from your environment. What that means to you is you no longer have to worry about securing from a PCI perspective, at least. Your switches, your agent desktops, your agents never hear the card information. Your call recordings are now safe because there's no spoken card information being recorded. Your databases, everything inside of your environment at that point is no longer getting any credit card information. And so it's not a concern of yours, and you can spend your time, doing the things that make you money and that you're concerned about, take care of your customers instead of worrying about taking care of their credit card information. Next slide. So this is a high-level diagram of what we look like once we're in place and what happens with that card information. As you can see in the merchant box over there, there's a CDE, which is a card data environment, and that's actually an Echo environment inside of your data center. And what that does for you is anything behind that environment on your side is now out of scope from PCI because we no longer let the information pass through. When a caller is ready to make a payment, instead of speaking their card number, they're going to use DTMFs. We capture those DTMF tones and send them back to our secure data center that's not inside of your facilities. And we are PCI compliant, and we've been PCI compliant for the past 10 years, and we can provide an AOC for that. The beauty of this is, even though we're capturing the DTMF, your agent and caller are never disconnected. So they can have a conversation, continue to talk the entire time. So from a customer or caller perspective, there's really no change other than using their keypad to enter that information. Once it's all collected and you're ready to submit the payment for processing, it comes back to our secure environment where we then put the credit card information in the transaction request and we send it on to your PSP, and their response back to you will come back to you unaltered from what it is today. So again, what that means to you on your side is your back-end processing, the pieces that you do today to finish that transaction up aren't going to change. It's going to look the same as it does today. That allows you to not create extra work for your IT people, but it also allows you to make changes to that back-end system as needed without worrying about making changes to our environment as well. We don't affect that, and you're free to make enhancements, modifications, improvements to those systems without concern that you need to reach out to us to make sure that it's not going to break something or have extra expense to make modifications on our side. Next slide. Working with Ribbon, many of our customers now have gone this route. It adds an extra layer of protection to your environment. So in the previous slide where I showed that, I said everything behind us is now out of scope. We have the ability to go in behind your SBC, but it leaves your SBC in scope. Everything after us and after your SBC is now out of scope, but it leaves that SBC still in scope out there. With Ribbon in place, what that allows us to do is take the call directly from your carrier. Your SBC sits behind our card data environment and now is out of scope as well. So it's another piece of equipment you don't have to worry about in an audit perspective. Important thing to keep in mind, though, is we're not going to take away your ability to do move adds, changes, deletes. All of the things that you do with your SBC today will stay intact because you're going to keep your SBC. We're just going to sit in front of it. Now, I'm not saying about the Ribbon SBCs, it's carrier grade reliability. We have customers out there that can take 60,000 simultaneous calls. So from a telephony perspective, carrier reliability, you don't have to worry about those phone calls making it to you, downtime, redundancy, things like that. It's all there built in. Next slide. And here's another high-level diagram. As you can see, we show the Ribbon SBC in here as well now. As I just mentioned in the last slide, it really de-scopes even more of your environment. At this point, the only thing you're responsible for would be physical security. And you do that today already because your data centers are always locked down. I don't know anybody that doesn't have somebody log in and have logs and card access to their data environment. So from a PCI audit perspective, it only leaves you with the physical security piece. One thing I probably neglected to mention on the last slide was that card data environment that you see there, even though it's in your data center, it is an extension of Echo's internal network inside of there, so it's not tied to your network. You don't have access to it, and we don't have access to your network. The only thing that comes out of there into your environment would be basically a SIP trunk from our SBC to your SBC. So even though it's there, you're not responsible for it. We manage it, we maintain it, and take care of all those issues and monitor it. So it's out of scope for you. and it takes care of that environment so that now when you come time for a PCI audit, you're not going to be responsible for making sure your PBX is secure and hardened and your databases and your call recordings. You can just go on with business as usual and not be concerned with those issues. Next slide.
So Jerry, yeah, thanks, Jerry. So let me add one more piece to this. So we've talked about the reasons to go for PCI compliance using a system like CallGuard and the Ribbon SBC component being part of that. But what's important, and I want to put on the table, is even with all of this in place, there are other things, fraudulent activities that might still hit your call center. So what I show here is that session border controller that's inside the CDE. That session border controller can also logically be part of a Ribbon Analytics solution, which is what's shown here on the right-hand side of the slide. So a Ribbon Analytics solution would be making an investment in analytics for security and possibly for network operations purposes over and above what you might already have in the call center. So I'll go into a little more detail on this, but fundamentally, just to keep it at a very high level, there are any number of sensors. These are devices in the network, session border controllers, gateways, et cetera, firewalls. We can ingest data from those into a big data platform that we call Ribbon Protect. And on top of that, we have an analytics suite. So I'll talk a bit about fraud protection as an example. It is not a required part of what we talked about earlier with CallGuard and Ribbon's SBC. It is an opportunity, though, to take advantage of that SBC that's already in there and get more value from it. So let's talk a bit about Fraud Protect, which is our application to detect and then give you the ability to mitigate fraud. So calls are coming into your contact center. Even without the whole PCI DSS compliance, it's possible that you're going to be getting people making fraudulent attempts to get into your network and then use your network resources for fraudulent purposes. How do you know that's happening? Do you have a system in place that tells you that? If not, this is the opportunity to look into something like our analytics solution. What we will do with behavioral analytics is we'll actually track the traffic coming into your network. We'll be able to identify what is a normal traffic behavior. Now that may change by time of day, day of week, campaigns that are being run, but we'll be able to detect normal activity and, more importantly, identify abnormal calls that are outside of a variance that you've identified and then do something with that. We can alert you on that. You can then take action. We can actually allow you to customize your mitigation policies so they can automatically be blocked, or you can get an alert and then you can manually apply a previously defined rule of how you want things handled. So as an example, calls that are coming in detected to be abnormal, you then have a choice of how you want to handle that call, what the policy is, how long the policy is in effect, and what happens when normal occurs again, how you want things to be handled after that. And of course, obviously, you have dashboards and reporting. You can see all this. So again, I'll repeat what I said earlier because I think it's really important. You've got PCI DSS compliance. You've got solutions to take that out of your contact center, your call center, and keep that as no longer a problem for you. A session border controller that's included in that also keeps your session border controller untouched. And now there's a way to actually look at calls again that are coming into your network. May not be fraudulent activity, people trying to get into your call center and then use your resources. It may just be someone doing a telephony denial of service attack who's just blasting traffic at you with an attempt to cause problems for your business, right? So again, we're looking at the traffic. We see all the traffic that's coming through that session border controller. It goes into our analytics solution, and we can track specific defined metrics. We can use our behavioral analytics again to detect call anomalies that are indicative of you're under a telephony denial of service attack. Again, same process, if you will, at a high level. The attack gets identified, you get alerted, mitigation policies can be manual or automatic. The choice of what metrics are used, we certainly have our recommendations, but the choices are up to the customer as to what metrics they find important to determine whether or not there's really a telephony denial of service attack. I want to touch as well on one other item here, which is our Discover application, which is really monitoring troubleshooting. And so I'll leave this on the screen. I won't go into all the details of each of these portions of that application. But again, for the same reason that SBC is seeing all the traffic, and we can make KPIs and CDRs available into our analytics solution, right? That now you can start looking at troubleshooting. You can look at continuous monitoring. You can drill down at any level of traffic that's coming in across your SIP trunks. You can get down to a call detail level. You can look at a call ladder diagram of a specific set of calls, right? You can have dashboards that will give you the ability to look at network performance, at traffic performance. The list goes on, right? It's a customizable, easily definable solution set from Ribbon and from Echo, who can bring this to the table as partners and give you more opportunities on top of the PCI DSS compliance CallGuard solution and the Ribbon SBC. And with that, Jerry, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
So as you can see, once you have CallGuard and with the Ribbon solution in place, you now have removed any risk of credit card data being in any of your environment. It removes the SBCs, the PBXs, your call recordings, your workstations. It makes your life easier when it comes time for your annual audit. We'll provide you with an AOC. With the Ribbon Protect analytics process in place, you can even de-risk and defraud even more of your environment. Next slide, please. And Bev, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. So, how does this all help the contact center better, support the end customer? We've talked about, ways that the Ribbon and CallGuard solution with Echo can help address PCI compliance. We shared some of the information about, how some of these analytics and insights can help you, better understand, what you're doing from a security perspective. But what's this mean for the contact center? It truly does allow you to provide better service to your end customer. Again, getting back to that comment about customers expect and demand that you service them, in a more convenient way, but yet they also, they're also demanding that you protect their financial and PII data. So, better service to the end customer is critical. In terms of what this means for the agent themselves, actually what we have seen is that the average handle time in the contact center goes down because there is better ability to quickly identify and verify information with the customer in terms of their card details. I mean, it really helps them, get through the call in a much more efficient it helps them more efficiently manage the whole customer transaction process. From the standpoint of, what this means from a compliance perspective, we talked about, the cost of cyber insurance. That there is, potentially showing, to your cyber insurance carriers, look, I've taken these measures to lower my risk, and that means potentially lower cyber insurance fees. It could mean with the compliance goals, lower fees with your credit card acquirers. So, overall, a very positive trend for the contact center. Next slide. And, just kind of, bringing this all back together, we hope that folks understand that just because, you've gone through a compliance audit, it really doesn't mean that the enterprise is truly secure. That again, there's a lot of falsehoods that are out there, a lot of fallacies that, that audit is just one point in time, but with the constant threats that are being thrown at the enterprise and the contact center, organizations really can't rest on their laurels here. So next slide. And what this means for, for the organizations, if you're keeping that sensitive data out of the contact center, away from your networks, away from the agents, their screens, their ERP platforms and whatnot, around card not present transactions, there's really nothing there for the fraudster to steal if you should be hacked. And keeping that data away from them, if there should be a breach, there's nothing for them to basically steal and misuse. So again, kind of getting back to that, you're protecting your customers and their data with these sorts of efforts. Next slide. So we've shared a lot of the statistics out there in terms of, what's happening with card not present fraud that's happening out there. Trying to de-risk is going to create additional work for the enterprise. I don't know of any organization out there that has technical teams kind of waiting in the wings to jump on a security issue or to patch an additional system. So what you want to really look at are ways to not only help your compliance and security roles, but really to make it a more efficient and streamlined process. Next slide. Okay, and that kind of brings us to wrap up here. Do we have any questions that we want to address here?
Hey, Bev. Yeah, we sure do. And while we go through a couple of those questions that have come in from the audience, I'd still like to encourage everyone, if you haven't yet, look at the bottom right of your screen. There should be a little question mark and an area where you can type in your question. So as we're going through these, feel free to continue to ask your questions. But from the audience, we did have a couple. One of them that I'll present here to everybody on the call is how does this type of solution work with a cloud-based contact center platform?
Okay, and this is Jerry, I can take that one. So from cloud-based, we also use the Ribbon SBC up in the cloud. We have an environment in AWS that uses the Ribbon SBC to bring the calls into exactly the same environment we talked about for on-prem with the audio appliances and everything else in place. In that case, what happens is, just like your cloud-hosted ACD, you'll point the traffic to the Echo environment prior to the call going to the ACD or the hosted ACD, where we get in the call path, and then we simply pass the call on, and it's business as usual for your hosted provider and your call center as well. And everything else works exactly the same way as the on-prem solution works.
Okay, very good. Thanks for that, Jerry. Another question that came in is who would support this type of solution once it's in place? Is it Ribbon support agreements, or is it Echo, or a combination? So who supports these solutions?
Again, this is Jerry. I'll take that. So from a support perspective, Echo is responsible for everything that we put in place. We manage, maintain, monitor the entire environment, including the Ribbon equipment. Echo is a gold partner of Ribbon, so we're trained and able to do all the maintenance, monitoring, upkeep on all of our equipment, as well as the Ribbon gear that's in place.
Okay. Let's see. My environment is both PRI and SIP, and I'm trying to move to SIP, but it's likely not going to get completed this year. So what can Ribbon and Echo do to help there?
Okay. So we have the ability from an Echo perspective to handle both SIP and PRI individually. So if you're totally PRI, we can accommodate that. If you're totally SIP, we can accommodate that. But we can also accommodate a mixture of the two. So as you migrate over, we would simply just remove the PRI pieces of the puzzle as you migrate over to SIP, but there's no reason to wait since we have the equipment. All our hardware is able to handle both PRI and SIP calls coming through.
All right. Just got a couple more here. So again, please ask your questions if you have one. So this is about implementation. My IT team is stretched really thin. What kind of resources does it require, or should they have to set aside to implement something like this?
Because Echo wraps around your environment, from a development perspective, there's really very little work for your development team to do. We use your existing APIs. We don't require a new payment page or a new PSP or any new APIs to be developed by your side. Really the only resources we need, and it's pretty much at the beginning and then toward the end of the testing phase, are some access to some network and voice engineers to make sure that we understand your environment and can then configure our equipment to work successfully with it.
Okay, very good. And the last one I have here is, actually we might have two more. What type of changes would I have to make in our current processes for payments?
So the only change you'll have to make is, from a payment page perspective, we're going to proxy that page and the submission of it. So the only thing you'll have to change is we'll give you a new URL to make the request for your payment page from. We are not going to recreate or host your payment page. We're simply going to request it from the original destination so that we can get in the middle of that call path and do the work that we need to do to put the real credit card information in. So from your perspective, it's really just a URL change for requesting the payment page.
All right, and we did have one that came in late here. The question was, and somebody answered it via the chat, but can we integrate this solution with voice as well as IVR? And the answer is yes, you can. The solution is in front of the existing IVR, so you can integrate it with whatever you have existing in terms of your IVR.
Correct.
That's all the questions that have come in. Bev or Jerry or Dan, any kind of last minute thoughts before we wrap things up?
Actually, Lance, the question about the, handling both voice and IVR, we should probably point out that CallGuard, that same sort of back-end technology can extend over to the omni-channel. We're starting to see a lot of contact centers rely upon chat agents and chat bots to service customers, and we can support, similar to CallGuard, we have ChatGuard, which allows the organization to support a PCI compliant chat payment. So, we're seeing, what the customer demands, it's moving over into the omni-channel in terms of, addressing the compliance and security challenges. So just wanted to add that. So
Yeah, good.
Any other questions that we're seeing out there from the audience?
No more at this time that I've seen. As Bev has here up on the screen, if you do have questions or something pops in your head later after the webinar, you can always reach out to Patrick at Echo or Scott at Ribbon. In addition, after today's webinar this afternoon, you will be getting an email with a replay of this webinar. You can also respond to that and ask your questions, and likely anywhere on ribboncommunications.com as well as Echo's website, echo.com. You can get a hold of people there, I'm sure, with any contact forms, etc. But that's really all I have for today. Again, last time, Bev, Jerry, Dan, anything else to add before we close things up?
I think we're good from the Echo side. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and if you do have questions, feel free to reach out. We're here to help educate and help you through the journey.
Well said, Bev. Likewise from Ribbon. Glad people could attend. Hopefully we've answered some questions or piqued some new ones, and we're here to help.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Be on the lookout for that email later this afternoon. Again, you will have a link to the replay of today's webinar. We thank you for your time, and please look forward for the next emails from us about another webinar coming down the road. Thanks so much. Take care.